Marble Arch website, and they're running until August the 19th. It's time for a final break now, but still to come. Is there space for AI whilst making music? Composer Benjamin Oliver stopped by the studio to discuss his latest lyrics, some generated by an AI model. See you soon. Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. Now, can AI write a love poem? That's just one of the questions composer Benjamin Oliver has possibly answered with his latest song cycle, Love Letters, including lyrics generated by an AI model tasked by researchers at the University of Southampton to come up with expressions of love. Well, Ben joined Sarah in the London Live studio to talk about the use of AI technology and his new music.
My piece, Love Letters, is a kind of song cycle, so it's 7 songs, which is written for British soul sensation Hannah Williams and Right Ensemble, which is a contemporary classical ensemble based here in London. And I think is special in a way, partly because it's for Hannah, who's just amazing, but also because the words for the songs are written in collaboration with an AI that we made at University of Southampton called Lovelace GPT. So it's like an AI language generation model.
Okay, so people have heard of ChatGPT by now, mostly.
Yeah.
But what is your version of the love version, and how did that come about?
Sure. So I first had the idea of writing this piece in kind of autumn last year, and then suddenly ChatGPT was everywhere, and I was trying it out to see if there was any chance that I could use it to create words for my songs. And one of the big challenges for composers is finding texts to set or to use in songs. I don't write words personally, so it's kind of so either work with a poet, work with old texts like Shakespeare or Beowulf or nursery rhymes. And so I suddenly had the idea. I work at the University of Southampton. We have a big web science institute which does lots of research into the web. And I had this idea whether we could make something that could generate texts. I always knew the piece would be called Love Letters, and so I formed a team with Will May, who's a professor in English, and Shoaib Jamel, who's a computer science lecturer, and effectively we kind of collaborated to make Lovelace GPT. Lovelace GPT only makes first-person love texts, so they're pretty mad, sometimes melancholy, strange, sometimes gibberish, but ultimately what it does is make kind of I love you type of words that we've then kind of made into, I've then made into music, set to music.
I mean, so we were talking a little bit earlier, but my first question is that is quite a big question. Can AI write love letters?
Well, you can. So AI in itself isn't writing love letters, but you can train a language learning model to try and write love letters. But ultimately, there's no love in a way. It's a machine, but it comes up with some really bizarre things. So some really evocative things that I don't think that humans could easily come up with, or would potentially come up with. So I prompted Lovelace GPT with delirious ecstasy, so you give it some words to respond to.
Okay.
So I wrote delirious ecstasy, and it said, "You're my biohazard baby." Now that is a cool line. Like, I've never heard that I can't imagine hearing that in a pop song. Of course, you know, there are amazing songwriters out there that might come up with that line, but there's something interesting about this computer who never runs out of steam as well. You can just ask it and ask it and ask it and ask it to make stuff. So, and then the big thing has been that there's an editing process. So Will May, my colleague in English, and I have had to edit the text so that there's very few pure Lovelace GPT texts. We don't add words, we only delete words.
Okay.
So we had this we made a decision quite early that we wouldn't rewrite anything Lovelace produces, but rather just delete words that when it doesn't make sense, or if we could see a kind of reason to do that in terms of the aesthetic of the poetry or in terms of making more sense of the poetry.
I suppose it raises a bigger question actually around poetry itself. You know, what makes something a poem, and again whether AI can produce poetry.
Yeah.
You said that Biohazard Baby, you're right, that's extremely catchy.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the process that surprised you or that you weren't expecting, or anything else that particularly stood out for you?
I think the thing that stood out for me is how it can trigger you, or kind of, so I'm a reasonably creative person. Like, I respond to things around me, whether that's working with puppetry or working with other scientists on projects, or working with poets indeed, or filmmakers. So having an outside influence in a way that is a machine is quite interesting, because you don't have to deal with their emotions. You're not collaborating in a sense that, you know, if I work with a poet and I say, oh, actually, I don't really like these 4 lines, I want to just delete them, the poet might say, well, I really like those 4 lines. The computer can't answer back. So
is that better or worse?
I think it's different.
Different.
So it's different, and really collaborating with people is exciting and wonderful, and I love it. But there's also something quite liberating. I had to write this piece really quickly. So there's something quite liberating about not having to run it past my collaborator.
Yeah.
You know, I could make decisions about what text I used and how I used it, without worrying about someone else. So that, for me, that's been really exciting as a composer. But that's not to say that I'm working for Poet in the autumn, and I'm really looking forward to that. So. A human poet.
Yeah, a human poet. No, I think it is, you know, sort of, it's pretty pioneering, sort of still at the very beginning stages of figuring out how AI is going to fit into our lives.
I think, yeah, so creative applications of AI are more embryonic than, say, you know, if you wanted to do something relatively simple, an AI to do, ChatGPT can actually do amazing things. It can write song lyrics, so you can ask it to rewrite something about working in a TV studio in the form of a country and western song.
But the AI hasn't put in the blood, sweat and tears that would be needed to find the words for that.
It hasn't, and it's still, and it's often not very interesting. Even if it's about working in the studio, TV studio, which I'm sure is very interesting, it's not. What it produces in terms of the wordplay, or in terms of rhyme, or in terms of adding in interesting elements, the things that make poetry actually interesting, or touch us, or kind of help us to think about the world in a different way, I don't think it really has access to that. So even our Lovelace GPT texts need in my view, need human intervention and presentation. So intervention to edit them,
yeah,
and then presentation
and
for me and then Hannah to interpret what I'm doing, to really sell them, because otherwise they are just gibberish on a page.
Yeah, so it's still the humans that put the heart and soul into the whole piece.
For me, but I would say that because I'm the composer.
So to come back to the human part of it, you said that you always knew it was going to be called Love Letters.
Yeah.
Why? Can you tell us about that?
I have no idea.
Really?
Yeah, it just, I had this, so there's a piece that I was really into by Caroline Shaw called Narrow Sea, which is a very niche piece in a way. I teach composition, so I was looking at lots of pieces for singer and ensemble. And I just fell in love with this piece and listened to it loads and loads and loads. And then I thought about Hannah's voice, who's also, she teaches vocals at Southampton.
Okay.
And I thought about, could her voice go with the kind of like percussion and keyboard and kind of electronic-y sounds that the piece inhabits. And I was very excited about that. So yeah, she's a wonderful singer who doesn't often work in the world that I often work in, if that makes sense. So she also brings something quite different to the sound of the piece. So she's kind of got a soul background. One of the songs, she's kind of being almost like a crooner, kind of jazz sound. So yeah, but she's been wonderful to kind of collaborate with and find things with. So she's been involved in kind of trying out the texts and doing top line works of improvising over music I've gradually pieced together her stuff into the songs as well.
There we go. Well, the Love Letters song cycle will feature on Ben's first portrait album, Too Many Sweets, which is due for release next year. Right, there's just time now for a final look at the weather.